Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today on today's panel on the topic of profit while making a difference with high-quality carbon credits. And what do they actually really mean? I'm Shimei, and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm the treasurer of Singapore FinTech Association and also the CFO of Spark Systems. I am so excited and so proud to present to you a really distinguished panel of speakers here today who are really heavily involved in green and sustainability, a very good diverse background. And I feel we are really lucky here to have this panel to share with us their insights, their knowledge, their expertise in this space. So I'm joined here today by Gabriel Wong, co-founder of Cyberdyne Tech Exchange, or known as CTX, Keagan Rubel, Director of Sustainability at PwC, Tom Enger, Head of Product at Climate Impact Exchange, and Janet Sum, ESG Specialist at STACS. So I would like to invite the panel to give an introduction of themselves first before we begin. So Gabriel, would you like to start first?
Sure. Thanks very much, Shimei. I'm the co-founder of Cyberdyne Tech Exchange. We are based in Singapore, and we are under MES licenses. We are licensed to act as a broker-dealer, to operate an exchange, and also to act as an asset custodian. So one of our products that we have just rolled out about 2 months ago, it's what we call the carbon neutrality token. And that's essentially a product that uses blockchain technology. And it's based off the underlying carbon credits that are verified and authenticated and registered on a national carbon registry. So we are very happy here to kind of share some of our experiences and some of our solutions with the audience today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gabriel. Keagan, over to you.
Hello. Yes, thanks, Shimei. My name is Keagan Rubel, and I'm Director of Sustainability as a Service for PwC, and we're helping clients up and downstream the sustainable supply chain. So really helping them progress along that sustainability journey. And whether you're a financial services institution looking to better understand, the green bonds ecosystem, or whether you're looking to quantify your carbon inventory and progress along that decarbonization journey through to sustainable supply chain and a wide range of different services. Really glad to be here today to talk a bit about the carbon markets and how those can be a piece of that puzzle to progress organizations forward along that sustainability journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Keagan. Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Shimei, and hi, everyone. So my name is Tom Enger. I'm the head of product for CIX. So Climate Impact X is a new global exchange headquartered in Singapore. It's founded by Temasek, SGX, DBS, and Standard Chartered, who are all very active in ESG and sustainability and carbon markets. And the CIX marketplace will be developing some platforms, including a project marketplace, auctions, and secondary trading venues. So looking forward to sharing with you today. Thanks.
Thank you. And Janet.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janet. I am an ESG strategist at STACS. Very happy to be here as well. At STACS, we were working with the MES on Project Greenprint to actually build this ESG data and certification registry. We've also recently partnered IoT technology company as well as a data analytics company to come up with a joint venture called CO2 Connect, producing this one-stop holistic platform. So I'm very happy to be here to share more about the work around STACS, as well as to share our opinions and on sustainability as a whole, especially around carbon credits. Thank you. Back to you, Shimei.
Thank you so much, Janet. All right, so let's begin. So planet Earth today is facing a global climate crisis, as we all know. So temperatures are rising, ice glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising, and ecosystems are shifting. And they are shifting for the worse. So we're right in the middle of COP26 right now, and staying below that 1.5 degrees Celsius is the only chance we have to avoid from tipping this edge and stabilizing the world again. And the time to act is right now. So how can we, or in particular, how can we as organizations play a role to fight climate change? And in particular, like, how can we as organizations utilize carbon credits in the space of carbon markets to enable a positive environmental change? So Keagan, I would really like to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure. Well, I guess I just want to comment firstly on that 1.5 degrees target, because there's been a lot of talk about that, and what we frequently hear by conversations with clients is, certainly that seems to be sort of a statistical anchor, but what real difference is 1.5 degrees from a climate ecosystem perspective? Is it really that significant? I mean, after all, 1.5 degrees is not a massive difference in temperature, and the reality is that 1.5 degrees is a global average increase, and in fact, the way the climate system works, that is a much higher increase in the poles and a less of an increase around the equator, and that has very significant implications on our ecosystem, our climatic systems. So it's actually sort of a 4 to 6 degree increase around our poles, which you can imagine then triggers quite a lot of glacial warming and melting, for which there is methane captured and sequestered in that ice, and it also reduces the reflectivity of the Earth. So that 1.5 degrees is actually very significant, although it's sort of a misnomer because it sounds quite small. But onto sort of the core discussion around carbon credits. And I think firstly, what is a carbon credit? I mean, and for those out in the audience, just for a quick clarification, a carbon credit essentially is where I want to reduce my carbon footprint, and I pay a company or a project to reduce or avoid an emission on my behalf, right? So we talk about carbon credits with typical units are 1 ton per 1 credit. That's a sort of a typical way that a unit is quantified. And these units then are traded. And we'll talk a little bit about the market mechanisms just very, very briefly around where they're traded and the functionality. But I think first and foremost, it's important to realize that this trading of credits, of environmental units of measurement like carbon credits, are not new. So in the US, for example, in 1990, we had a sulfur dioxide emissions trading scheme that was targeted to reduce sulfur emissions to avoid acid rain impacts, and it was very successful. It resulted in about a 50% reduction in, between 1990 and about 2004. And so, this, while it is newly applied in various things like emissions trading schemes around the world, and we'll talk about compliance markets versus voluntary markets in a second, but I just want to emphasize that commoditizing environmental allowances like carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gas emissions is frankly not a new thing. But as I just said, there are 2 real ways that carbon credits are exchanged and in today's markets, and that's through compliance markets versus voluntary markets. And in compliance markets, it's essentially you are legally required to reduce your carbon emissions. And so, if that is the environment that you exist in and you operate in as a corporation, you really have 3 choices, right? You can reduce your own emissions directly, or I can pay you as someone else, I can pay another company to reduce their emissions on my behalf, or I can pay a project to reduce emissions for which that project avoids or sequesters carbon. And so from the voluntary market perspective, right, so that's where there's no mandatory or legal compliance. Just backtracking for a second, the compliance markets, we have quite a few examples around the world. The European Union Emissions Trading Scheme was for years the largest market. We now have the Chinese Emissions Trading Scheme, and The U.S. has two emissions trading schemes, some regional ones. We have trading schemes in Australia, in Japan, etc. So there's quite a number of emissions trading schemes now. Whereas a voluntary market is an organization that is not explicitly mandated to reduce its carbon footprint, but nonetheless, for a number of reasons, has decided to make a net zero emissions commitment. And in that context, they may choose in part to reduce their carbon footprint by buying one of these carbon credits. And for years, this has been the case. There's been the purchase and sale on a voluntary basis of carbon emission credits for the last decade plus. However, throughout especially the early years of when this was happening, there was a lot of frustration by certain stakeholders and questions as to the validity of the legitimacy of use of these carbon credits. And I think that's in large part what we want to talk about today is, what makes a high quality carbon credit, and is it enabling greenwashing? What is the carbon credit role in the sustainability journey of an organization, and is it not just buying your way out of responsibility to reduce your carbon footprint? And I would say, first and foremost, I will just jump to my conclusion, which I want to just say before I sort of get into a couple of bullet points, before I pass on to the other speakers, is to say, first and foremost, carbon credits are certainly not greenwashing. And especially with the level of rigor that they're verified and validated today, they're absolutely an important and critical mechanism to channel funds towards projects that will help to reduce carbon emissions globally. And I want to just sort of caveat that by saying, or add to that by saying that certainly in the level of urgency that we have around managing and reducing carbon emissions from a global perspective, we absolutely have an all hands on deck approach, right? We need every tool in the toolkit, of which this is a very critical one. So I want to just clarify a bit around misconceptions and why it was previously blamed in large part for leading organizations to make these type of quote greenwashing claims where it sounds very nice. They're saying they're carbon neutral and other sort of bold environmental related ambitious claims, but in reality they are sticking with business as usual. And first and foremost, when back in the 2000s, for example, projects were generating carbon emissions credits that would have happened anyway. And that is a legitimate claim to say that potentially emissions coming from projects that would have happened with or without the funding generated by carbon credits is not a legitimate carbon reduction from an atmospheric perspective. And so there was in the beginning, especially in the 2000s, some legitimate claims around that. And importantly, I want to just clarify the concept of additionality is very central before I sort of wrap up here in just a second, which is that carbon credits are a critical element to getting a carbon credit certified and through a verification and validation third party against one of the sustainability carbon credit certification standards that are there today, which have been increasingly strict, is that the concept of additionality, which means that when a carbon credit is purchased, those funds in large part go to the project developer. So it is a mechanism that channels funds into projects. And the presumption behind a carbon credit is that project, let's say it's an offshore wind farm, for example, that offshore wind farm in that example would not have moved forward without the funds from those carbon credits. And if the carbon credits funds come in, therefore it has the financial capability to move and feasibility to move forward. And that is the concept of additionality. So if regardless of those carbon credit funds being paid into that project, in this case, the offshore wind farm, if that project were still to be built and move forward and the investors felt it was a sufficiently good return on investments and make that investment, then that project would not be additional. It would have happened as a business as usual, and would have been a normal investment and project activity. But what carbon credits, the area they play in is creating projects that would have not otherwise happened through that funding mechanism. And that concept of additionality is why they are legitimate claims to reducing carbon emissions. And certainly, and last thing that I want to say is, despite everything I just said, it absolutely is the responsibility of any organization to not just say that they want to make a carbon neutral claim and buy 100% of their carbon footprint out through carbon credits, right? Because essentially you're not changing your business as usual activities, you're not decarbonizing, you're not taking advantage, you're not managing the risk or taking advantage of the opportunity of a carbon constrained future. And so certainly the good practice in carbon management in this space is start first and foremost. The priority is reduce your carbon footprint as much as you can in parallel and in tandem with offsetting the rest of your carbon footprint, which may be temporarily too costly or unfeasible to reduce. And so these are mechanisms that can work in parallel. It should not be either or, and it should certainly not be all carbon offsets and no internal reductions. And I think
thank you so much, Keagan. Thank you. Wow, that is really very insightful. And what you said about the frustrations that some people face on the quality of the carbon credits there is. Are they really a true representation of the reforestation projects? Are they really doing what they're doing? So I guess there's a lot of skepticism going around this whole idea of carbon credits, and I guess it really boils down back to the idea of how do we establish trust? How do we establish trust with the people that the carbon credits that we have are really of good quality? And are they really doing what they say they're doing? And is origination truly green? So based on this, right, I'm thinking how can we do this? How can we establish the trust, or how can we ensure that the credits are of quality? Maybe Janet, maybe you can share a little bit more about this, and how does tech come into play?
Thank you, Sharmaine, for that question. I think it's a great question. And I think whatever Keagan has actually mentioned, it really plays a very huge role in a big part of my answer. So when we talk about quality carbon credits in the first place, how we actually define quality and how we establish trust is really like what Keagan mentioned. How high is the level of integrity of the green projects that the credits have actually stemmed from? So these projects would include things like carbon reduction or carbon avoidance projects by different corporates. So how do we actually achieve this really lies in traceability and transparency. And to that, I think blockchain technology, as well as and not just blockchain, of course, the integrations with many different types of technologies for this one-stop holistic platform will be very important. Before I dive a little bit deeper into that technology piece, I'd just like to take a step back and speak from the conversations that we've had with different financial institutions, with different corporate stakeholders, with holding different responsibilities towards sustainability over the past few months. The problem we see is that there is not enough data. There is this insufficient as well as not exactly very clearly verified data. And to make things worse, there is this fragmentation that's going around there. There is no actual one-stop platform or this common data infrastructure that different parties can actually tap trustable information from. So that's why STACS has actually seen this problem, and I believe it's not just STACS, but many different technology players have seen this issue. And basically, from a STACS perspective, or speaking from STACS, what we're trying to do to rectify this problem is really to build this ESG data and certification registry. And talking about this, we're actually partnering with the Monetary Authority of Singapore to come up with this tamper-proof library of attestation or tested information from the different corporates across various sectors, such that now financial institutions or even for carbon credits, the data can then be trusted data can then be tagged for provenance, and also to give this assurance to the traders of the credits that hey, the credits that I'm purchasing or that I'm selling, I can confidently say that it came from a project that was truly green, and that there was no form of greenwashing. So this, I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be wondering, exactly how can a library help me achieve traceability and transparency, and that really comes in with the partnerships of various technology players. So to give you a live example, STACS is actually partnering IoT partners as well as data analytics partners. And what we have formed is really this joint venture called CO2 Connect Private Limited, or for short CO2X. And we offer this holistic platform whereby our current focus is on the transport and logistics sector. So we'll get all these corporates, to track different variables using IoT, things like driver behavior, fuel consumption, idling time, etc. We place all of these information and feed it, into the data analytics platform. And why this is important, that contributes to the quality of carbon credits, is because this data analytics platform will utilize different ESG standards and certifications to ensure that whatever raw data that we're collecting it fits the requirements of these standards, and therefore we then are able to very more clearly identify each corporate's carbon footprint, computate their baselines so that they know exactly how much carbon credits they are able to generate eventually, once they go into deeper shades of green with their transitions from better ESG strategy, again backed by and taken from with reference from all these data that's being collected as well as processed. And then all this then impact reports and your different process data that is already certified by your ESG certifications will then be placed onto this fed onto this registry, where then using blockchain we're then able to tag all these or tokenize your carbon credits and tag the information such that like I've mentioned before, the buyers or the purchasers, traders of the credits are then can then very confidently say that it's of high quality and it's data backed. So to the audience, if you're interested in how these platforms work, we do actually have platform showcases later on at 3 p.m. with regards to the ESG registry in partnership with MES for Project Greenprint, and also on CO2X we do have a showcase that happened yesterday, so you can watch the replay later on. But just to summarize and wrap up the question that Shimei has asked me, with technology now and this one-stop holistic platform, as well as the collective efforts of the different stakeholders, not only technology, but players such as PwC, your advisors, players such as the Carbon Exchange that Tom is from, as well as other technology players like Gabriel. We if we can all work together, to form this one holistic and collaborative effort, I'm pretty sure the impact will be really huge. And from there, achieving not only good quality carbon credits, it won't be an issue, but things like mobilizing better green capital, forming this positive cycle whereby corporates are now able to achieve better sustainable financing with all these data. They will then be able to form this positive cycle of pushing the money towards more sustainable initiatives and then generating more carbon credits, which Keagan also mentioned will really do help other corporates offset their carbon emissions in the short to mid term, should they not be able to generate their own due to the nature of their sectors. Yeah. So with that, I'll pass the time back to you. Thank you.
Yes, very interesting, Janet. Yes, so you did mention about, the need for being, transparent and the data, the integrity of the data. How do you know that those quality carbon credits can actually representing the, the right projects? And this is done through proper certification projects, proper reporting via the blockchain. So just a recap on blockchain. Blockchain is a distributed ledger technology, and the main goal of blockchain is to ensure that the record of transactions are not compromised. They are secure and they are accurate and verifiable. So that's one of the ways that probably blockchain can help solve this issue of poor quality credits. And on the topic of blockchain, Gabriel, Cyberdyne Tech Exchange is a green digital exchange, yeah, and also focusing on digital asset-backed tokens with a green twist. So maybe you can share a little bit more about your involvement, your aims, your goals via this very very exciting initiative that you have.
Right. Thank you. So as I said earlier, and as you just pointed out, one of the products that we offer on our digital asset exchange is what we call the carbon neutrality token. And this token was particularly created for the reason to really enable the cross-border trading of carbon credit, right? I think that everybody on the panel and I guess people in the audience are all aware of what carbon credits are, and of course the importance of, I think, using carbon credit as a tool during this transitional period when companies are trying to kind of get up their green credentials. And so carbon credit, I think it's a very, very useful tool. As Keagan mentioned earlier, it actually helps to unlock capital to fund the right so-called green infrastructure. So before I kind of go more into the nature of this product, right, the CNT, I think that it could be quite helpful to provide the context that would illuminate the issue of surrounding cross-border carbon credit trading, or what is commonly known as a double counting problem, right? So say, for example, if a Malaysian company is to buy carbon credit from Indonesia, the question is, who owns it, right? Does this carbon credit count towards Malaysia or Indonesia? And if you think about it, this is really how the issue of double counting arises, right? And it is really because of that under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, each country really commits to a nationally determined contribution, or NDC for short, which simply put, it's a national emission quota, right? And this accounting issue, it's fundamental because if we don't get this right, we don't really know where we stand on a global basis when it comes to net zero, right? And to be honest, the only net zero that really matters, for this entire conversation is the global basis, right? So it doesn't really matter whether a country or a company gets to net zero through its own effort, whether it's because they are trying to get rid of carbon emissions from their operations, or they buy carbon credit to offset their footprint, right? The important thing is really the planet as a whole getting to net zero. So if you look at it from that perspective, this entire conversation about going green, getting to below 1.5 degrees on a global basis, something that I think Ruben touched on briefly earlier. It really should be a global effort, right? But because of NDC, it has inadvertently created a sovereign issue or nationality issue when it comes to carbon credit, right? So unfortunately, I think that a lot of people are buying and selling carbon credit or facilitating the sale of that, right, without really realizing that they are sort of adding to, I guess, the messy picture that is, carbon credit trading, right? And they really do it out of good intention, right? But the fact of the matter is that if we don't get the accounting issue right, we won't know where we are, if we're on track globally when it comes to net zero, right? And that's really the goal that we all want to get to, right? And this is, a very fundamental issue, which is separate and related to what I think Jeanette and also Ruben touched on earlier, which is about the quality of the carbon credit, right? So quite apart from the quality, I think that it is important that we also think about how, the selling and the buying of the carbon credit doesn't really violate the NDC, right? And so how do we, Cyberdyne Tech, solve this problem, right? So from our perspective, we are really providing a private market solution that works in lieu of, any agreement or consensus on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, right? So what we have done is that we have created a system that works directly with the respective national carbon registry, or even international ones like the World Bank, right? And we do it to help to tokenize the carbon credits that are already registered with them, right? And by doing this, we avoid all the, the quality questions that has been raised, right? It's because we know that these carbon credits, when they are registered with the respective national carbon registry, they have already been verified, they have already been certified, right? And more importantly, they have been registered, right? And we know that we can trust them because each of these national carbon registry, or even the international ones like the World Bank, right, we know that they follow a rigorous protocol in accordance with the UNFCCC, which is the Framework Convention on Climate Change, right? And so by working with these national or international registry, we avoid the NDC issue, right? Or what is commonly called the double counting issue, right? Because we essentially make sure that the carbon credits are registered, and then they are frozen before we, enable them for cross-border carbon credit trading, right? So we put all this information on a blockchain, right? And this is, again, something that I think Jeanette mentioned earlier. We use blockchain. And the purpose for that is that to enable the investors that come onto our platform to be able to kind of track it and to verify it, right? They would be able to go onto the blockchain and say, look, this particular carbon credit that we are buying, we're able to track to the particular project that generated the carbon credit, the country that the project is located, what was the methodology that was used, when and where it was registered and frozen, and all the information. And taking all this information, all this data, we then create what we call the Digital Depository Receipt Program, right? This program works similar to the ADR program for shares, for those of us who are in a capital markets business, right? And this program is essentially based on the underlying carbon credit, and then we issue the tokens based on these underlying carbon credits. And these tokens are exactly what we call the carbon neutrality token. And each token essentially represents 1 ton of carbon credit, right? So the way that we have done it really is to combine the national and the international registry together with blockchain technology, and to kind of create a viable pathway to kind of bring scale as well as capital to the voluntary carbon credit markets, right? So as I mentioned earlier, we are an exchange licensed by MES. So one of our goals eventually is really to facilitate the financing of green and assets and green infrastructure, right? And we believe that by solving this problem with regards to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, the issue surrounding NDC, we are providing a compliant pathway for cross-border carbon credit trading. And as a result, we enable global capital to flow to these projects, to fund these green projects that would generate high quality, verified, registered carbon credits. That's essentially what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. So it's a very interesting, all this complexity surrounding Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, with the rise of the challenge to properly account for and track the carbon credits results in the fragmentation in the markets. And with the tokens that you have described, this is kind of the way of utilizing technology to actually resolve this issue of double counting. And like what Janet also has mentioned about data integrity, and Keagan also mentioning about the involvement of voluntary markets, and to actually scale this, I'll move on to the next topic on exchanges. So Tom, CIX, Climate Impact Exchange, is a global carbon exchange marketplace. Can you share us more about voluntary carbon markets and CIX involvement in this space? And is CIX going to be the game changer for Singapore and maybe on a global scale?
Sure, thanks, Shimei. Sure, so Climate Impact X is one of many organizations trying to help scale the voluntary carbon market. As Keagan said, we all need to do our part and also show urgency. So CIX was put together by some significant shareholders who are already active in this space, and they have very strong networks and resources to help make a difference. So briefly, Temasek is already a significant investor in sustainability and in upstream projects for carbon credits. And Standard Chartered is leading an initiative called the Task Force for Scaling the Voluntary Carbon Markets. And DBS is very active in sustainable financing. SGX has a suite of ESG investable tools and helps advise listed companies on how to report. So you can see that these shareholders who are very passionate about this space have come together with this exchange to try and make a difference. Now, how does this work? We have basically two major problems, as the panelists have described. There is a scaling problem on the one hand, and there is a quality or trust problem on the other hand. And we have to address both. It's very challenging. We all have to address both issues. On the scaling side, what's needed is that good quality supply of projects of carbon credits can come to market faster and can scale up. And what they need is financing, support for the verification and validation of their projects. And they need everyone to help with the technology that can bring different types of credits to the market. For example, some of the carbon credit technologies are very nascent. So you might have heard about direct air capture using chemical extraction, or you might have heard of bio waste to energy and carbon sequestration. I mean, there are a lot of innovations here, but we all need to channel the capital to these kind of quality projects. On the quality side, on the trust side, as the panelists have mentioned, there's a lot of challenges with making sure buyers are confident with the integrity and trustworthiness of these credits. So we talked about data integrity, but CX is also helping with other types of integrity around the projects themselves. I'll give you a good example. When it comes to nature-based solutions, these are rainforest or mangrove projects that bear carbon credits. We employ satellite monitoring agencies to surveil the projects to make sure that there is real sequestration going on. And we also use third-party rating agencies who take a view on whether the project developers have a sustainable future and whether there will be any risk in the credits themselves. So you can see that it's necessary to wear down the perceived lack of trust in some carbon credits. So CAX also helps to improve trust in the execution of those credits. So naturally, as an exchange, we do KYC and we do extra due diligence on the carbon credit projects as well. So this is just to give buyers more confidence.
And exactly how are the KYCs and the due diligences done? That's something quite interesting. Like, do you harness technology on this end of the spectrum?
So KYC, from an exchange point of view, it firstly is about ensuring that the companies themselves are credible. And this can also be done through intermediaries such as banks who bring their own corporate clients to the exchange. But in the sense for carbon credits, it mostly refers to avoiding money laundering. So historically, and even now, it's possible, of course, to use carbon credits as a money laundering device. So KYC mostly is trying to eliminate this kind of activity.
Okay, very interesting. So CIX actually just completed the first ever pilot auction as well. And it involves a lot of partners. And you did mention Temasek, DBS. And, I guess from another standpoint, we were talking about technology earlier with Gabriel, Jeanette, and Keagan. I guess collaboration and partnership with the players of the ecosystem to actually resolve this global issue is something that is also very, very vital. And, maybe you can share more about this pilot auction and how did it come about?
Sure, thanks. So auctions are responding to a buyer concern about the potential riskiness of individual projects. So individual carbon credit projects are all unique. They all have particular impacts, SDGs, but they are valued differently by different buyers. So just like in the real world, if you were to auction a unique work of art, an auction is useful for price discovery. It helps many buyers to get to a common sense of what is the value of this project. And also from the project point of view, it gives them a platform to demonstrate their value. If you create a carbon credit bearing project in some part of the world, it may not be visible to all the corporates who wish to retire these credits. So what we do is we bring together quality buyers and these quality projects into one auction venue. And the second thing we can do is to group these projects together as portfolios. So this helps because you have a diversification effect. And the buyer is buying many types, many projects of the same type, perhaps. So we demonstrated that there's a demand for this kind of application. And it shouldn't be too surprising because as in capital markets, some people prefer to buy ETFs, which are like a mix of individual stocks. And that gives them a sectoral exposure. So what's happening now is a lot of innovation in the carbon credit space. And this is one type of innovation in types of portfolios that can be auctioned.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tom. So for the audience, if you have any questions at all, feel free to type into the Q&A box on your right, and I'll probably just read it out later. So to summarize, coming out of COP26, we need to secure a net global zero by 2050, and 1.5 degrees Celsius, as what Keagan has mentioned, is not small. It is actually a very huge number. It is something that that needs to be acted upon right now, quickly, and on a scalable manner. So, a few key takeaways from today's panel on transparency, data integrity, technology, harnessing technology, having ecosystem players in the market to actually reduce risk of investment in carbon credits, and actually encouraging buyers and sellers to actually invest more into carbon credits. With all of that in play, how do we see the use of carbon credits in meeting our decarbonization goals? It seems to be like something very far away. Do you think that carbon credits can truly solve the issue of climate change? Maybe I'll hand it over to Keagan to kickstart.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I think that absolutely we need and all tools in the toolbox, as I mentioned earlier, and I think Tom and Gabriel mentioned some very important elements within their respective systems in terms of how carbon offsets can contribute towards a solution. I mean, typically, to answer your question directly, are carbon offsets going to be an effective mechanism for driving change? I mean, look, I put it this way: when we're dealing with an organization, first and foremost, you ought to be pursuing a hierarchy where you start looking internally and you work with demand side management, right? How can you reduce your energy demand? Secondly, be looking at efficiencies. How can you increase your energy efficiency? And then thirdly, looking at how can you generate and build renewable energy into your portfolio, whether if you're infrastructure, potentially it's photovoltaics, if you have office buildings on the roof, for example. And fourthly, then moving forward, and it sort of depends on what business you're in, but can you procure renewable electricity? So whether that's through a power purchase agreement or through the grid, or depends a bit on which market you're in. And then, following that, if you can't purchase it directly, can you purchase renewable energy certificates? And then lastly, if none of that is feasible and possible, and there's still additional residual emissions within your portfolio, can you offset those emissions? And the answer is you want to do it, but you need to make sure, and yes, you should do it, and you need to make sure that those offsets are real and they're permanent. And I think that's a lot of what Tom's platform brings value to the ecosystem, and as well, from a cross-platform perspective, and also Gabriel's platform as well. So, I think that they all play a very critical role in getting us to where we collectively need to go.
Yeah, and Keagan, maybe can you share a bit more about PwC, in this green space? Like, how are you helping empower corporates or companies to actually, head towards the decarbonization goals?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of what I just said, sort of helping progress along that sustainability pathway and journey. At the end of the day, you need to start by understanding what are the issues that are most salient to your organization, and so from a strategy design perspective, we need to start by identifying your critical stakeholders and understanding within your stakeholder ecosystem, what your material issues are. And by material issues, we mean the most relevant and impactful issues from an ESG, environment, social, and governance perspective. And then once we identify those, we can measure those impacts, we can baseline where you are for those issues, and we can create a hierarchy of priority against risk, likeliness versus impact in terms of where we want to be focusing and what initiatives we want to design to address both risks and opportunities. So from a strategy and design perspective, from helping set up the target operating model internally, setting KPIs internally, drafting sustainability policies, all the way through to helping with compliance-related issues such as the MAS guidelines for financial services institutions around climate risk disclosures, through to carbon footprinting measurements and sustainability report writing. All of these are the types of things that we are supporting clients in from a PwC perspective.
Right. Thank you so much, Keagan. Maybe Janet, can you share with me on your opinion on, where are we at, and, are we on track to actually meet our goals on decarbonization?
Thank you for that. I don't think we are, to be honest with you, I don't think from my perspective that we are on track. But the heartening thing is that we do see a lot more efforts as compared to the previous few years. And hopping onto the other question that you were asking, Keagan, on whether carbon credits is going to be a very useful tool in helping or achieving our decarbonization or sustainability goals. I do concur with Keagan that these are actually very important tools, but at the same time there is a lot more to that. It really lies in the details. So if we have large MNCs or large corporates who have the monetary capability to purchase carbon credits to, let's say, reduce their carbon footprint, that in itself is a great act towards sustainability, and yes, it will kind of help towards carbon neutrality. But if we're going to look at it from a different point of view, some critics might worry, that the carbon credit trading program might be an excuse to, not take tougher measures to curb climate change. And if it's not done right, they're basically just using or purchasing carbon credits, generated by other corporates as a means to show that they're sustainable. But in actual fact, it's not to a large extent true. So it really lies in the post-purchase. What I mean is, corporates can purchase these carbon credits to help reduce their carbon footprint, but what else are they doing, to really on their own part remove or reduce carbon emissions that they are generating or contributing to global warming. To give you an example, in America, there's an airlines called JetBlue. They actually do purchase their carbon credits in order to reduce their carbon emissions, and it's natural for airlines like themselves to be producing a lot of carbon throughout their operations. But at the same time, what is very impressive on their end is that they have also subjected or rather spent a large amount of money or investments in sustainable aviation fuel. And this is a big plus because it shows that I am approaching sustainability from two different ways and not just relying on, let's say, carbon credits to help myself reduce carbon footprint. This is a very good example, a positive example. But on the other hand, let's say we're not talking about carbon credits and just in general whether we're on track to achieve our sustainability goals. If I were to take the financial sector for as an example, just a few days ago, Bloomberg Green has actually reported saying that as of this year, financial institutions, for example, your banks and investors, they've actually invested 469 billion worth of brown bonds and loans towards the oil, coal, and gas sector. And we all know that this sector is actually one of the largest polluters today. But at the same time, they have also, the financial sector has also, disbursed green bonds and loans worth up to 453 or 63 kind of billion USD worth of all these green capital. If we were to compare the two figures side by side, they are actually very much similar. So are we actually putting in that effort, to achieve the sustainability goals? Are we really putting in the effort to, be more green? Is something that is a little bit more questionable. And I think the main way that we can truly achieve or see results or positive impacts on climate change is really when not only large corporates but your small and medium enterprises also have this or achieve this mindset whereby they are genuinely wanting to transition towards green. And Obama made a really good speech over COP26 as well, saying that it's all about sacrifice. There are certain things that we have to sacrifice as decision makers in businesses, regardless of size or sector you're from. You have to sacrifice that profit in order to achieve sustainability. But in the whole view, if we were to zoom out a little bit more, it's not so much of a sacrifice anymore in the long run, because if let's say we don't we only care about profits today and we're not going to bother about green or make the effort to change our mindsets, then what kind of business are we going to make when the world goes bust, for example? So it really boils down to mindset, and I believe that influence the various actions that the corporates are taking now to become more green will definitely influence a lot of others who are less aware or of what they can do. And I mean, of course, mindset is one thing, and along with others, we definitely always emphasize on this point on collective efforts. It's very important for different stakeholders, especially regulators, to come in and basically answer all the questions on let's say which standard is the corporate supposed to meant to use. Is there going to be this one holistic standard for the entire sector and stuff like that? So really, collective efforts, mindsets will help towards sustainability, and I think we are definitely going to be on track as we go along this path. Yeah.
Absolutely, Janet. Very, very good point on having the right mindset. While a lot of businesses are really focused on the main thing, which is actually profit generation of their companies, they are more focused on their operations. Sustainability will be at the back of their minds, and however, they do not realize that it is a pressing matter, that we are far but yet so near the goal of decarbonization, and really having that mindset, that collective mindset, is important. Okay, so Gabriel, what do you think about this? What do you think? What do you see in the market, and how with COP26 happening, keeping the 1.5 degrees Celsius alive. Are we there yet?
Well, I think, unfortunately, I think this is a very complex issue. It's, as I said earlier, it's a global issue, and it needs, I think, everybody, chipping in. Is going to be a collective effort. I mean, just to, I guess, give one data point, right? So, according to the International Energy Agency, they said that even if all the countries keep their climate change pledges and they absolutely comply with them, it is forecasted that we will still be at 1.7 degrees, which is slightly higher than the the requirement, which is 1.5 degrees. So that's actually I think highlights the urgency of what needs to be done, right? And of course, even the UN subsequently released a statement that says that it is even then, right, the forecasted 1.7 degree is very optimistic, right? It's more likely to be 2 degrees, right? So I think that definitely a lot of work remains to be done. Unfortunately, I think that current methods to decarbonize are very, very expensive. While a lot of efforts have gone into, I think, some of the technology, including carbon capture technology, it is still very much immature, right? Or it's very expensive. So I think, therefore, in this context, carbon credits, the trading of carbon credits, particularly cross-border, right? It's essential, as I said, during the transition period, right? And at the same time, I think that carbon credit actually helps us to sort of put the issue of climate change front center, and it in a way, it helps to change the behavior of mindset, both of the corporates, government, as well as the consumer, right? Because, when you talk about carbon credits, you actually have to pay a price, no matter what the price is. So I think that with the cost, it actually helps to sort of captures and focuses the attention, right? And I guess the last point I want to make is that I still think that despite all the criticism about using carbon credit, right, which is something that I think Ruben already touched on, I think that is still a very good way, a very efficient way for capital to be channeled towards funding green projects. So I think that's pretty much where we are now, and that's how we can kind of maybe take the next few steps.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Very, very insightful. Okay, so yeah, it's really, having that collective initiative to really push this forward, push ourselves to reach the goal. So which links back to the idea of, scalability once again, scalability of, the carbon credit market, how can we have more investment in reforestation projects, more investment in green projects to really, reach towards our goal of net zero. So, Tom, what are your views, out on decarbonization? Like, are we, how far are we from there?
Well, sure. I mean, the market has to transition away from primary fuels, coal, oil, and gas, and this is the work of 30 years or more. So, the elephant in the room is that you have to reduce or shift away from, critical fuels are in our everyday lives. And the big challenge for hard to abate industries like steel and cement and plastics and others is that it's very difficult to fully decarbonize. For these industries, even if you switch out your electricity to renewables, if you make strong energy efficiency improvements, you probably can only get down to 50% of your decarbonization because you are left with the infrastructure. It's difficult to actually substitute the machinery or to substitute the car on the road. So this leaves a space for carbon markets, carbon credits. After 2030, with thousands of companies making their climate commitments to be net zero, there will be a flood of buyers who need to offset at least 50% of their remaining footprint. So this is a market that's in fast development, but it has is going to need to be much larger and is going to be much larger. I think we're all working in our different ways, as you said, to scale the market and to maintain high quality and trust, and trying to innovate like CTX is doing with cross-border innovations, and like we're trying to do with portfolios and auctions, and like STACS is doing with blockchain solutions. It's necessary to build some of this trust, foundational trust, in the market.
All right, thank you so much, Tom. Okay, so we only have time to take one question, and all right, I'll have this question from Richard. So he asked, carbon credits have been getting bad publicity at COP26 due to accusations of greenwashing. So given the size of carbon markets, billions and growing, how do you prevent perversion and keep that decarbonization efficiency in mind? So who in the panel would like to take this question?
Sorry, Keagan, can't really hear you. You gonna go first, or shall I?
Oh no, I think that's a great question for Tom. I think
Tom.
I'm happy to chime in. I sort of spoke to that earlier.
Okay, Tom, you can hop in later. I'll just give my opinions on this. Yes, carbon, I mean, this is something that we've been discussing over the course of the panel today. There are a lot of carbon markets growing, and yes, there might be, certain views that carbon credits are actually a form of greenwashing in the sense that, corporates, some corporates are just purchasing it, using money and not actually doing anything sustainable on that end, and just, then claiming that they're green, which in actual fact might not be. But how can we actually prevent this is really via technology. So if we go back to my answer, or even Gabriel's, how can we make use of technology to help with traceability and transparencies on the projects that the carbon credits stem from. So that is one way, we can actually talk about, let's say, framing the project or the origination of the carbon credits at the beginning and making sure that it is following certain ESG certifications and standards throughout the entire project. And, with blockchain technology, as well as your IoT or even your data analytics, it ensures that the right data is being collected, and it ensures that the health of the data is indeed, living up to the requirements of these certifications. And then we also, rely on certain advisors, your auditors, your certifiers as well, policymakers basically, to, really think of how they want to craft any upcoming or even updates the existing certifications to enhance the whole sustainability drive of it and the impact that comes with it. So that will be the answer on how to keep decarbonization efficiency in mind. And sorry, one more point is that, perhaps we can come up, or there might be certifications or requirements rather, that will encourage, or rather make it compulsory for corporates who are not able to generate these carbon credits to try and once they purchase these carbon credits, then how are they going to go according to the recommendations of the regulators that according to their sector to become more sustainable. That will be another way. So with reference to the example of JetBlue that I was giving, how the fact that they're actually purchasing carbon credits to be sustainable, and at the same time, investing in sustainable or renewable fuel, that is one way to achieve decarbonization as a whole, instead of running the risk of being greenwashed. The electric planes that are coming out as well now in recently, which is also another example of how an airlines sector that is once pretty brown can actually go green. Yeah, so maybe Tom or Gabriel or Keagan would like to add on.
Thanks, Jeanette. Some good points. Yeah, just to summarize, greenwashing can be thought of in three ways, I think. One, are the carbon credits real? And I think Jeanette and Gabriel answered this well, because you can avoid double counting, double spending, and you can show transparency. The second is whether or not the carbon credits are instead of removals. And I think Keagan addressed this directly, that you have to have a prioritization scheme with removals first and carbon offsets later. And thirdly, some people get accused of greenwashing if you buy credits that are too old or poor quality, or it's too small a part of your budget. So this relates mostly to additionality. Is the carbon credit doing additional benefit in the world? So you don't want to go buying a credit for, say, a hydropower project that was going to be built anyway. So these are the main criteria of greenwashing, but I think all of these are being addressed in the marketplace, and buyers should have more confidence nowadays.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, panel. Oh, wait, hold on. One more question from Richard. Do we have time? Maybe just a quick one. So, question for those who have mentioned technology such as blockchain. we see a lot of media about how energy intensive some use of blockchain is. Okay, this is very interesting. So how green are we aware on the use of blockchain? So basically the question is asking, how do we know how much energy we are using in the blockchain technology?
So how green basically is the blockchain? Yes, we have a lot of these answers. I think Gabriel can chip in as well. Basically for STACS, we are using our own enhanced Ethereum blockchain. And this algorithm, or rather the consensus that we're using, is wrapped in BFT, which means that there is no proof of work or proof of or mining that's involved. Hence, there in itself there is very little energy required, because there's not so much computation that is done, or a lot of power required for computation on our end. But yes, blockchain is one of the more energy intensive technologies out there. But it's really how are we using this piece of technology. In the case for STACS, when we're using it as a registry and the tokenization of the carbon credits, it's not as much as what you would imagine for cryptocurrencies, etc. Maybe Gabriel can.
I think that we use blockchain pretty much in the same manner as STACS. We also employ the Ethereum blockchain, and we do not. We use it primarily as a ledger, as a registry. So by doing that, we sort of minimize the so-called activity on the chain. At the same time, the nature of the product that I spoke about, which is a carbon neutrality token, it is something that we can also use to offset against our own footprint. So I think that it is something, a tool, a technology that we use to help to I think to solve some of the questions surrounding the trading of carbon credit. For example, what Jeanette said, the integrity issue, and also about making sure that the data it can be properly tracked to the underlying project, right? I think for us, and I think as Jeanette said, right, we all need to be very mindful about the energy consumption, and it's something that we use it to help us achieve the decarbonization goal.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabriel. Okay, so with that said, it's been a very, very fruitful interactive session. I really enjoy what the panel has to share, based on their experiences and knowledge in their space. So feel free to link them up on LinkedIn, and it's been so good, and just to sum it up, it's really a collective effort. It's a collective global effort from all players of the market. So ourselves, organizations, and it's not just about cutting emissions. It's also about increasing green projects. As we are so near to the 2050 goal, but yet so far. So it's not just about carbon credit per se. It's really about harnessing the technology behind it, utilizing the resources while being mindful of the capital that is involved, and making sure that data is the integrity of the data, is it verifiable, through data analytics, through proper certification processes, through proper reporting. And yes, it is really an ecosystem global effort. So with that said, I would like to thank the panel for sharing today's session, and thank you everyone for coming today and listening in.
Thank you, Shimei. Thanks, Keagan. Thanks, Tom and Gabriel as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.